that many of us have forgotten. At the moment, with all this credit crunch, etc., that you find, there's one business, I don't know here, but down south, that's thriving at the moment, and that's the old age pensioners' homes. To place your parents in a home. It's big business. One person, they were charging him approximately £800 a week to keep him in a home. £800 a week. تصوروا هذا, think about this. Paying to have your parents just put away from you. Sounds strange, but you know, many of us Muslims, or some of us Muslims, are following exactly the same methodology of thought. Because remember, the wider community has a big influx, a big input into the way it creates your character. Thus, I'm not very startled at times to find that people with short thobes and flowing beards and faces covered, that sometimes you find vile, vulgar, repulsive language coming out of their mouths, and even cursing and swearing towards their parents. It's not surprising. Shouldn't be something surprising, because the whole culture breeds this concept of separating oneself from one's parents. That I am a man in my own right. Who are they to tell me what to do? What influence do they have upon me? And we can see the fitan and the fasad that begin to take place, that in the disguise of quote unquote Islamic practicing, that my father is no longer my wali. On what criteria? He doesn't pray. He's not a good Muslim according to you. So now you are scot free to bypass your father and to marry whomever you want. And if you go and study the fiqh of zawaj and the role of the wali, that discussion may take place about, etc., does the person establish the prayer? It does exist there. But a large portion of the ownership of the wali remains upon the experience of life. The father will never choose a person who's going to be corrupt, or a person who's going to be not having the interest of his daughter at stake. So the experience of life gives that father, that wali, that ability. And thus you find that some men, you find they have the farasa, the ability, that the way that a man walks into a gathering is enough to analyze the individual. And you can see what I'm referring to. If you find a young Muslim boy with his pants hanging down below and walking in and strolling in, you can just, in 10 seconds, analyze what the lifestyle and the behavior and the character of this individual is. So we want to return back to not just talking about fine creed and fine implementation of sunnah, but fine character as well. Especially those individuals that many ulama have mentioned or highlighted, that the sabab, the reason for you being in existence in terms of the natural process of birth, etc., is your parents. So something has to be returned back to them. And as any basic elementary student of the Quran knows, that wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the concept of tawheed and worship and ibadah, we'd also mention something else. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Strange, isn't it? We always emphasize about tawheed, and then we forget to miss the ending of the ayah. Your Lord has decreed that you should worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you should show goodness to one's parents. وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ, worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, associate no partners towards Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we find وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Strange again, isn't it? The call of tawheed, the coolness of oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, devoting yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then somehow we forget the second part of the ayah about showing goodness to one's parents. Surah Luqman, the surah, the 31st chapter of the Quran, described as the surah of tarbiyah, of cultivation. There's certain main surahs inside the Quran, if you go back to them, and you study them, you'll find a great focus of khuluq, of character, of tarbiyah, of cultivation. Amongst them you find Surah Al-Hujurat, the 49th chapter of the Quran. Some Mufassirun, they write, if you want to create the ideal Islamic society, then implement these 18 verses. The end of Surah Al-Furqan, the 25th chapter of the Quran, talks about the characteristics of Ibadur Rahman, what the characteristics should be upon this earth. Likewise, the beginning, the first 11, 12 ayat of Surah Al-Mu'minun, the 23rd chapter, all talking about the character of the believer. Surah Al-An'am, we find teachings inside there. Surah Al-Isra, we find teachings inside there. And then we find inside Surah Luqman another concept of tarbiyah, of how Luqman, alayhi salam, says to his son, وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانُ لِابْنِهِ وَهُوَ يَعِظُهُ يَا بُنَيَّ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّ الشِّرْكَ لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ. Luqman gives an admonition to his son, and the first teaching that he teaches him is يَا بُنَيَّ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ. Never ever commit shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ الشِّرْكَ لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ. Shirk is the most biggest oppression that you can do upon yourself. And that's we find in two locations inside the Quran, exactly identical verses, exactly inside the same surah, on different instances. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forgive the associating of partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. And forgive whomever He wants other than that, besides that subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a person dies upon shirk, you've just sealed your own coffin. إِنَّهُ مَن يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ الْجَنَّةِ وَمَأْوَاهُ النَّارِ وَمَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ مِنْ أَنصَارٍ. So that's the Quran inside Surah Al-Ma'idah. Whoever commits shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَقَدْ حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ الْجَنَّةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it haram, haram, haram ala hada shakhs yadkhulul jannah. We haven't made it haram. Books of Aqa'id haven't made it haram. The Quran has made it haram that the person who dies upon shirk la yadkhulul jannah, will never enter into paradise. So that's the first tarbiyah that the father or the mother gives to the child, to teach them about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the devotion, the commitment towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلْ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Say my prayer, my sacrificing, my living, my dying, it's all dedicated towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I associate no partners in those actions, and I submit myself amongst the first and foremost individuals who submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we find in the same surah, the later stage, verse number 14, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ. We enjoined upon him to show goodness to his parents. A legacy, a wasiyah. Many times this word comes inside the Quran. That indeed we did give wasiyah to the people before you and to you, and ittaqullah, to worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a legacy is like a will, something that remains for as long as this dunya will remain. That we've told you to be good, you need towards your parents. Another location we find this legacy continues inside Surah Al-Ankabut, the 29th chapter of the Quran. وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حُسْنًا. We've given the advice, the legacy to human beings, to mankind, to show goodness, to show kindness to one's parents. Another location we find, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ إِحْسَانًا. We've given the legacy upon the human being to once again show kindness, goodness to one's parents. So this covenant was present previously as well. As we find inside the Quran, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. We took this covenant from Bani Israel, that you should only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you should be dutiful, bound to show goodness towards your parents. Also in prophetic teachings, in the ahadith, ayyul amali ahabbu ila Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which action is most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?